morning, good evening, good afternoon. Is Zimbabwe going to sleepwalk into yet another 2028 rigged elections, as happened in 2023? Well, the answer to that has got to be yes. We are going to sleepwalk into another flawed electoral process and just repeat what happened 2023, 2028, and so on. Zanu PF will never reform itself out of office. That is a fact, a political reality that I think many Zimbabweans out there would accept. And at the present moment, there is really no pressure on Zanu PF to implement any meaningful reforms. The party blatantly rigged the 2023 elections and got away with it. And it's clear that history is going to repeat itself. The party will rig 2028 elections and get away with it. So why would they want to change when they know they can rig and they can get away with it? The people of Zimbabwe have got to realize that if you're going to have free, fair, and credible elections, you cannot look to Zanu PF to implement the reforms, because they will never do that. It is not in their interest to implement reforms. It's never been in their interest. Here is Mnangagwa insisting that the 2023 elections were free, fair, and credible.
Kana vakatuka Zanu PF kana ndonyanyisa kufara kuita zvakanaka. Ukavona vavengi vako vachikurumbidza nekuchikanganisa, ukavona vachiti Zanu PF yakaipa, farai. You are doing correct things for your country. Homu takaita maelections edu kuna vamwe vaitaura zvisina musoro zvikanzi maelections anafamba zvakanaka ndezvavo.
There is no pressure on Zanu PF to implement reforms and hold free, fair, and credible elections. That is their political reality. The second question one has got to ask: will Chamisa and company participate in flawed 2028 elections as they participated in the 2023 elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy? The answer to that is yes, they will. Some people have refused to accept the political reality, but that reality was driven home in 2013 when MDC leaders realized they failed to implement even one token reform, and if they wanted to have any share in the spoils of power, they had to participate, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that it was illegal, and that the only logical step was to withdraw. But in their case, they could not withdraw because they also realized that they are competing with their counterparts in MDCT or MDCN. And having failed to implement even one token reform during the GNU, they could not jolly well pretend that they could force Zanu PF to implement reforms, because Zanu PF would cleverly turn it around and say, well, why didn't you implement reforms during the GNU? So MDC guys were in a fix. If they were going to have any share of the spoils of power, they'd now to come up with a new strategy. Forget implementing reforms. Let's pretend we can win rigged elections. Zanu PF knew that was their position and exploited it. Just as Zanu PF exploited the opposition during the GNU by bribing them with the trappings of high office, make them forget about the reforms. Now, post-GNU, Mnangagwa and Mugabe before him knew that as long as they offered a few gravity seats, the opposition will participate no matter how flawed the process gets. And that is exactly what is happening here. Of course, they had to tell their followers a different story. They couldn't tell their followers that we are participating in flawed elections out of greed. No. They had to tell them we will win. And so since the 2008 to 2013 GNU, MDC-CCC leaders have told their followers they can win rigged elections to entice them to participate. And unfortunately, many of the followers have been so naive and gullible that believed it. So to go back to the original question we asked, the third question there has to be, will Chamisa be able to con millions to participate in the flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy, as happened in 2023? The answer to that is yes. What some people have failed to understand here is that the so-called Chamisa Chete Brigade and many of the other ordinary Zimbabweans who may not be fanatical supporters of the party have failed to understand even some of the most basic things that have been happening here. Ever since the 2023 election, the number one debate that has literally paralyzed political discourse in Zimbabwe is, did Chamisa lie about plugging all the vote rigging loopholes to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections? Well, we have the answers. Zanu PF blatantly rigged the 2023 elections. So surely the answer has to be yes, he lied. And yet, many Zimbabweans out there cannot accept it. This is the headlines on Monday, July 24, 2023, just a few days before the 2023 voting day. And in it, the headlines is, ED has no room for rigging. And the paper was quoting Chamisa. Chamisa did say he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. If he had plugged them, then how come Zanu PF were able to rig the elections? And rig they did. So we now find ourselves in this situation where Zanu PF rigged the elections, which Chamisa had said was not going to happen. And yet, his supporters cannot accept that as the political reality. Here he is telling his supporters just a few days before voting that he was preparing his cabinet, confident Triple C would win big.
Makorokoto Zimbabwe nokuti hakuna munhu anomira kana denga raronga plan. Denga raronga plan, denga harifoiri. Plan yaMwari haifoiri. Ini ndatanga kugadzira cabinet. There is no way we are not going to form a new cabinet. There is no way we are not going to have a celebration. There is no way we are not going to have an inauguration. Let's start preparing for our inauguration. Let's start preparing for our celebration.
Chamisa was lying. He was telling the people that God was in it. It was God's plan that Triple C would win big. That he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. That was all lies. And yet, even now, with the benefit of hindsight, there are millions of his followers who still refuse to accept that Chamisa lied. Some of them have accepted that he lied grudgingly, but with a proviso. They will say, yes, he lied, so what? Well, if they understood the consequences of those lies, they would not be asking such a stupid question. Because he lied and millions believed him, and that's why they participated and gave Zanu PF legitimacy. And now to say Chamisa lied, yes, but so what? It doesn't matter. It only leaves room for him to lie again and con the same people to participate in 2028. And that is exactly what is happening. As long as millions participate in the flawed 2028 elections, they will give Zanu PF legitimacy. So yes, at the end of the day, one cannot deny that the chances are, in fact, it is certain Zanu PF will go ahead with the 2028 elections. it is almost certain, it is indeed certain that Chamisa and company will participate, fighting to see which one of them wins the few gravitrine seats that are on offer. And millions, particularly of the so-called Chamisa Chete Chete Brigade, will be conned to participate in the flawed 2028 elections. And by participating, they'll give the process legitimacy and Zanu PF legitimacy, taking us back to where we are today. It is a pity. It is tragic, but that is the reality. Our only chance was to make sure that Zanu PF does not have political legitimacy after 2028. And that we can only accomplish if we can stop the Chamisa Chete Chete Brigade participating in these flawed elections in their millions. SADC in the AU condemned 2023 elections as flawed and illegal. But they could not take the next logical step and deny Zanu PF legitimacy because people participated in their millions. And that is the same problem we are facing today. There are millions out there who will easily be conned to participate in 2028 elections on the basis of the same idiotic lie from the likes of Chamisa saying he is going to win rigged elections. That is our problem. And at the present moment, those people are not listening at all. Tell them that Chamisa told the same lie in 2023. They don't care. That is why it's so impossible to communicate with these people. They failed to appreciate that Chamisa's idiotic lie is behind them participating in flawed elections in their millions, giving Zanu PF legitimacy. It is not rocket science. But for some reason, many of them have failed to make that quantum leap. And as long as millions remain ignorant of the consequences of participating in flawed elections, we will remain stuck with the vote rigging Zanu PF getting political legitimacy because we participated. That is the reality. That is the truth. Unless we do something about it, we are in trouble. It is a pity that 45 years after independence, we are struggling to hold free, fair, and credible elections. Because millions of us out there still have no idea what constitutes free, fair, and credible elections. Of course, it is unforgivable. How can anyone in this day and age still fail to define what constitutes free, fair, and credible elections? If they did, they would not be so vulnerable to being conned. Chamisa's whole political career is based on conning people to believe he and his friends in the opposition can win rigged elections. And we're not just talking of rigging, we're talking of the blatant rigging that we've seen Zanu PF do. The rigging that David Coltart acknowledged was so blatant. And as he said it in his book there, so flawed, so illegal, the only logical step to do was to withdraw. The only reason they have not withdrawn is greed. That quantum leap has proven to be near impossible for many people. And this is why we are where we are. I believe it's not rocket science. Why the people of Zimbabwe failed to make that quantum leap for themselves really beggars belief. If we, between now and 2023 elections, which is about 3 years, 2028 elections will be held sometime probably in July 2028, which is now 3 years from here. If we do not manage to persuade some of the millions of the so-called Chamisa Chete Brigade and force them to open their eyes and appreciate the sheer futility of participating in these flawed elections because they believe the likes of Chamisa lies. We fail to persuade them, then yes, Zanu PF will rig 2028 and will have political legitimacy. And we will be stuck. That's the truth. Think about it. Thank you very much, those who were able to join. And I hope we'll be able to do it again tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock UK time, 8 o'clock Zimbabwean time. Good night.